But at the end, the model is, of course, developed countries. So we can say that except for the post-developmentalist theories, which I will talk about tomorrow, the theories are quite the same. They want the developing world to look like developed world, and they will say, my model is better, my way of thinking is better, but the goal is the same everywhere. So with that, I have, let's say, finished the introduction, and I will just now focus on the evolution of theories. And first, I will begin with the theories of modernization, which are, and I say theories of modernization because you can find different approaches in modernization from different disciplines. There is modernization view in psychology, there is modernization view in economy, there is modernization view in sociology, and so on. So there are different perspectives that could be all said to be modernization, but they could be different from one point to another. What does modernization mean? Different explanation for modernization. First, it could mean only a change, and that's how it has been used. It also can mean the feudal society becoming capitalists. This is another meaning of modernization. It has also been used as the program of a state which wants to develop. This is, of course, much more focused on developing countries. But in the modernization theory, the three meanings are used all together, which means that it's seen as a change in developing world. It's seen as going from the feudal society or traditional society to the capitalist society. This means modernization, and also this is the program that a state uses in order to modernize. There are some common points to these different perspectives in the modernization theories. And of course, one important characteristic common to all of these modernization theories is that they are non-Marxist, nor non-Marxist theories. This is really the difference between the modernization theory and the theories I will talk about later that we can call radical theories. So one of the characteristics of these theories is that they are non-Marxist, and they all began in the 1950s, which means just after the Second World War. One belief also, one common belief, let's say, is that all the nations could reach a modern level of life if they apply the adequate policies. What is adequate policy? It's not very far from what we say or we do today. It is the policies that have been used by European countries historically to modernize. It is the way that has been followed by Western countries. which includes industrialization, democratization, and so on. And you can, of course, guess that these modernization policies, these modernization theories, have really influenced the way developing countries, states, have organized their policies. Some countries have followed the socialist way, but mostly this is the way development policies have been applied. What is another characteristic of this point of view, and then I will go further into the theories, is that they don't take into account the history of developing countries. They don't take into account local aspiration. They don't really take into account what people want. They don't take into account the difference between the women and men point of view. They are not gendered, as to use a modern world. So they neglect the local specificities, the local differences. And you will understand why, because they are all focused on a universal model. Of course, these modernization theories that began in the 1950s don't come from nowhere. They have grounds, they have roots, and the roots are in the economic theories and sociological theories of the 19th century, usually 19th century, or 18th century for the economic point of view. For example, their economic point of view is influenced by the ideas of Adam Smith. Adam Smith, who worked on the importance of production, who stressed and emphasized the importance of division of labor and the place of market. They are also influenced by Ricardo's thought, which emphasized the importance of comparative advantages. These are ideas that are very modern now. We also are in a way of seeing the world that use and that focus on these ideas, of course. But they are also, these modernization theories are also leaning on what Keynes, another economist, said about the role of governments in promoting economic growth. This is, let's say, the ancestors on the economic field. In the sociological field, they are very influenced by the positivists. Who are the positivists? Well, the father of positivism in sociology is Auguste Comte, a French theoretician. That I want to talk a little bit about, because it's interesting how some problems of the 19th century could be used and used to explain things in the 20th century. Auguste Comte was a sociologist who worked on the consequences of industrialization. And he was, what can be said, a theoretician of order, which means that he try to explain the world in a way that things don't change. What can we do so the society stays stable? Let me explain myself. In what is the problem of 19th century? It is, if we can compare it to what happens in the developing world. What happens in the 19th century is industrialization, which means that there are more and more people working in industry. It's the transition from an agricultural society to industrialized society. And these newly workers, proletariat, to use another word, is living in the newly built cities in very bad condition compared to the people living in developing world. Huh? And to use the vocabulary of that time, the people who owned the factories, the bourgeoisie, compared to proletariat, first they didn't really think about these workers in the factories. They didn't think about them, about human beings. They were just there. But after a while, this bourgeoisie, which is a rational class, the bourgeoisie is not a stupid class, they also realize that if they don't take into account these workers, the order will disappear. It was good for them to think about the workers because if not, their wealth will be destabilized. So that's how sociology was born. Sociology, in the beginning, is a discipline from right. It's not a left-wing discipline. Now it's getting a left-wing discipline. It is a left-wing discipline, and sometimes it's forbidden in some countries. The sociology is not taught in all the countries because it can be subversive. But in the beginning, it was not the case. It was a discipline of order. And the sociologist, Auguste Comte, had to explain what to do in order that the society doesn't break. So this is the role of the theories of development. In the 1950s, the role of theorists and theorists of modernization is to explain what to do in order that the relations of developed countries with the others can persist. Why? Why? Of course, you can understand it because in the 1950s, what has changed is that a lot of countries which were colonized have got their independence. So the previous metropoles, the previous colonial powers have to think about their relation with their previous colonized countries. So that, of course, and we will get to the political context, so that after the Second World War, they are not attracted by the Soviet model. After the Second World War, the problem is that the world is bipolar, let's say, USSR, United States, and the problem is how to attract the newly independent countries.